What's up, fellow wizards? It's Dev from the place. You know the place. And I'm here today with a friend. I so rarely have friends, but he's such a good guy. Welcome, everybody. Once again, PowrDragn to the channel. How you doing, man?
Good. How do you not have friends? You're a good guy. Like, you should have plenty of friends.
It's the same reason that you might not is because we work. We work like,
We
what do
work
you do?
a
Like
lot.
80 hours a week. Yeah. This is the only time I get to talk about anything to anyone. We talked about wrestling for an hour before we got on because, like, oh my God, I get to talk about something other than Magic with a real life person. So,
By the way, if you're a
appreciate
wrestling
you for
fan
that.
right now, like, this is for real the renaissance of wrestling. Like,
Good
every
Lord.
bit of wrestling is good right now. It's crazy.
Yeah, man. Mania just happened over the weekend, and we could probably fill an hour or two talking about that.
Dude,
but
I have some independent stuff I follow on like Twitter and whatever. They're all saying like every show is just sold out. Like
I
standing
bet.
room only, which is crazy.
so we really should get together on that podcast.
No joke.
We keep talking about, but for the time being, regrettably, we have to talk about Magic the Gathering. But we actually have something fun for you today. Something we've been doing for the last few sets now. It's becoming tradition. We're going to talk about our top 5 most overrated cards in the Cowboy set. I'm going to do 5. He's going to do 5. And since you are the guest around here, figure I might as well go ahead and let you go first.
Oh,
What is
man,
your number 5?
I'm coming in hot on the first one.
Okay. I love that.
Going with Gold Vein Hydra, which is going to have people just up in arms. I know, but it's a green and X. It's a Hydra. Now, admittedly, get a lot of abilities. So it has Vigilance, Trample, Haste. It gets +1/+1 for each you spend for X, like a Hydra. But when it dies, you create that number of tapped treasure tokens, which is awesome.
Yeah, it's good ability.
The thing here is, one, a lot of things just exile anyway.
Yeah,
Right. So
Sunfall Standard.
There's a real
Wandering
chance we won't necessarily even get those treasures, which is kind of disappointing. Right. Technically could still be removed by the white card that gets everything like 3 or 2 or less or whatever, because it'll just be a green and X when it's on the battlefield.
Temporary lockdown. March also March of Otherworldly Light always kills it.
Exactly.
For like 1
Again,
mana.
Exile stuff. So that's a little down, a little unfortunate. However, that being said, I do still like the card. I'm probably still going to play with it.
Yeah.
But it's going for a lot of money right now, man. I think I've seen these as high as like $20 on some websites.
It's ridiculous.
So I'm just like,
this is like a $5 mythic.
Yeah, I mean,
Probably.
I'd be generous and go like up to 10 maybe, but it's not 20.
How much is the red one worth? We already have a creature just like this in standard. It doesn't like pop and give you a bunch of treasures when it dies, but like there's a red flying trampler that costs X and a red, and it comes into play and gets counters equal to X. And like it sees super sparing play in the occasional like mono red or dragons deck, but like it hasn't been that important. And this card reminds me of that card a lot. And like,
I mean, I don't get me wrong. I like the upside, right? The fact that it's vigilant, so it can't be removed by a Wandering Emperor, super
huge.
awesome, right? The fact that if it does die, running into a, I don't know, let's say Shieldred, since it has Death Touch, right? You do get something for the effort, right? You get some treasure that allows the next big thing to happen. And the question for me comes down to, where does it fill in on the green-based aggro decks? Or does it just want to be in something that cares about treasure? Right? And I think that's what we have to figure out.
My outside chance for this card to see play is just as like a bridge in ramp. Imagine instead of Topiary Stomper, you play this on turn 3, and it is a 2/2, which isn't great, right? But if it dies ever, then you get a whole extra ramp. You get 2 ramps, right? So if this ever dies, it's going to help you cast the Atraxa because it fixes your mana.
Yep.
So there is that about it, but ultimately I'm just not, I don't think it's there either. It's on my top 50 list right now, but it ain't super high up. This is one that's got to prove itself.
Yeah, this is one, if anything on my list, this is the one I want to be the most wrong about.
Same. Yeah. I would love for you to be wrong about it. No, I honestly, yeah, I like this card a good bit, but I'm just with you, end of the day, it's a little mana intensive. It's, even with all the keyword abilities, I want to see it. I really do. But
I just realized, my list is probably going to have multiple things that are getting me heat. So I need to know your number 5 so I can get people off me for a little bit.
Last thing I want to say about this is like, why are you booing him? He's right. Like the card is, it's fine. The card's fine. And that's why it's overrated, because it shouldn't be $20. It's not amazing. It's fine. Fine Magic card. But number 5 on my list is Gitrog, Ravenous Ride. Now, this
Yeah.
5 mana frog horror mount. It's a 6/5 trample haste, and when it deals combat damage to a player, you can sacrifice a creature that's saddled at this turn. If you do, draw X cards, put up to X land cards from your hand onto the battlefield tapped, and X is the sacked creature's power. Now, this does saddle for just 1, so if you can saddle it with a token and draw a card and play a land, like, sure, it does have haste, so I think the ambush mode matters like just a little bit on this, but altogether, I'm not seeing it. If you have 5 mana to cast a relevant creature in standard, I think there's like 4 or 5 more I'd rather cast.
Yeah, I think that's the tough thing. Because it's not like, I mean, you're paying 5 mana for a 6/5 trample haste. Like, those are real size, real stats. Like,
those are numbers. Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm also like, okay, if I'm playing green black, is this what I'm wanting to be doing? Right? Would I rather have a Shieldred or an Archfiend or hell, I don't know. There's so many things we're playing these days at that
Yeah,
cost.
I mean, this is 5 mana, so like Aklazotz is and that's a very good magic card. The new Gisa, I think at 5 mana, the new Gisa is probably better.
Man, yeah, I don't know. Like I'm with you. Like I think this is good, but I think this is exactly what leads to overrated, right? Like it's playable. It's going to show up in some of my lists. Like the upside on the ability is actually pretty sweet because it gives you something to do with just a dork sitting around that's not doing anything. But at the same time, it's a little overhyped. Just a bit.
Like even if, okay, so you saddled it for its minimum cost, if you saddled it for 1, okay, I draw a card. I mean, it's good. That's fine. But is it amazing? Like if I saddle it for, like, let's say I saddle and the guy I saddled with has 3 power. Yeah, I draw 3. That's amazing. However, I came off some real board position by sacrificing a 3 power guy. And that's another thing I don't think people are really seeing is like, yeah, I got 3 fresh cards, but I lost my graveyard trespasser.
And like, that's the issue for me is what am I willing to give up to get that? Now, is there a world where maybe this fits into some token type deck or one of these decks with golems where you're making 3/3s or something that you're willing to toss away? Like maybe, but giving up that creature, if you don't find a good replacement, is tough. Now, admittedly, you get to put some lands into play, and I think the lands are untapped, so they don't even come into play taps. So that's awesome.
Oh,
like, so there's oh no, they do. They come on the.
I was gonna say,
they are tapped actually. So
okay,
you don't even,
whatever.
So you don't even get to use the mana right then, right? So that's the thing. So yeah, I don't know. It's a good card. It's fun. I will probably play it a little bit, but I'm with you. I think it is just being a bit overhyped because people aren't considering the downside.
Yeah, I think the best thing about this card is trample haste.
Oh, absolutely.
Big power trample haste. So ambush, the potential's really there, but aside from that, no. So what is your number 4, my friend?
Again, people love this thing. I think, okay. Do you remember when we got to the new Star Wars movies, the recent 3, and you had those little porgs or whatever they were? And now the story of those I understand is those are actual natural birds that live there, but they kept getting into the scenes, so they CGI'd them to be something that looked like they fit. So you got porgs. This sort of reminds me of that. This is the porg of the set, right? Like some company's going to work with wizards to make like plushies or purses or something made at dice bags, But loot the key to everything.
Yeah, it's the baby Yoda of the set.
Yeah. Like, I mean, I get this is one, like, I get it. It's cute. It's fun.
It is adorable.
The art is awesome. But man, all right. So everybody doesn't know, loot the key to everything. Loot being the creature's name, not loot the key to everything.
Yeah.
Is a green, a blue, and a red. It's a beast noble, which is interesting for creature types. It's a 1/2 with ward 1. And then at the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of your library, where X is the number of card types among cards you control, non-land permanents you control, and you can play those cards. Now, you still have to pay the cost. It's not play for free or anything crazy. Ward 1 on this guy is just, hey, we couldn't have done better. Like, Ward 2, maybe sacrifice the thing, discard some cards. Like, I don't know, something. Maybe they take some damage, because like Ward 1 on this guy being a 1/2, it's just like, okay, I'll just pay 2 mana for my play with fire, whatever. You know what I mean? Like, it's just
I have seen a lot of people talk about this card in Commander, where it makes sense. I think that the Commander crowd can be really excited for this, but I've seen far too many people talk about it in Standard, where you have to wait an entire turn to get anything off of it. They can screw it in multiple ways. They can either kill him or they can kill your other stuff that would trigger it. Like there's plenty of ways to just neuter this card. Pun intended, probably. But like also it's in a color combination that doesn't see a whole lot of play outside of the World Souls Rage deck, and it doesn't go in that deck. It's super awkward. People have compared this to Rafine, and like you are smoking something.
Oh, definitely not the same as that. No,
I think it's just because it's a 3-mana legend with Ward 1, and it's like people think, oh well, the ward on Rafine is annoying, so I'll always untap with this in play. And like, nah, probably
Rafine's
not.
also a 1/4 though.
Yeah,
right. Like I mean, that 4 toughness makes a huge difference.
Huge. It's like, yeah, they'll pay an extra mana for their whatever cut down. They don't care, you know. So I mean, I guess they could cut down Rafine as long as she hasn't swung yet either. But you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like they can play with fire this. They can lightning strike this, where they can't do that with Rafine. So it is not as immune to as much removal as Rafine. I think people are getting their lines crossed there.
Yeah. Also, it's one of those abilities that triggers during your upkeep. So even if you draw it late, like you still don't get the benefit of the card for a full turn cycle.
So you have to wait a whole turn for this thing, man.
Yeah, and then you're hoping you have, I don't know, maybe a creature, artifact, golem thing, and
enchantment.
Yeah, something else. So you're getting at least 3 cards to look at. Because otherwise, I don't know if the investment's worth it to just look at like 2 cards. I mean, maybe it is. I mean, I don't know.
Do you get to play all the cards you look at, or do you pick one? How does it work again?
You can
any of the cards.
You can play those this turn.
I mean, let's say I have an artifact creature and an enchantment. Like that's 3 cards. Like
yeah,
it's not
that's
bad,
a real number.
But you don't draw them. Like you got to play them this turn. So
exactly,
like, your deck has to be relatively low curve so you can actually play all the cards you see. And I don't know.
I mean, the upside's big if it sticks. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. Like the upside is awesome, but I don't know how often I see myself realizing the upside here on this type of card. That's my issue. And the fact that this thing has versions going for $30 and $40
Good God, really?
on different websites, I'm just like, I can't do it.
I didn't know it was like that. Jeez, man.
Yeah, I just can't.
I mean, again, it might just be all off Commander hype, but I've seen too many people mention this for constructed formats. I've seen people talk about it in Pioneer and Explorer, and like, no, maybe we're wrong, but we'll see. But yeah, I'm with you. That's definitely an overrated card.
Well, what's your number 4, man? It's got to be less hate inducing than this.
No, actually, I think basically any card you could point out, because everyone loves Loot so much.
That's fair.
Just mostly because they're like, he casts Charm on everybody, and
true.
It's stuck. But mine is a card that people really, really like, and it's Honest Rutstein.
Yeah.
God, this card, a lot of people are freaking out because it's Eternal Witness, but it's not. It's 3 mana, 1 a green and a black for a 3/2 legendary human warlock. So it's an outlaw. When Honest Rutstein enters the battlefield, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Creature spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. So I've heard people call this everything from a better Grave Digger, which is like not a very good card to begin with, to an Eternal Witness, which is just absolutely not. It's kind of like a Gloom Shrieker, although Gloom Shrieker can get back a permanent card, whereas this is just creatures. I also think that even though the best part of this card is probably the ramp, I'm not as impressed by the ramp as I've seen a lot of people. I think one of the better uses I've heard called out for this is in like Domain Ramp. You play it instead of Topiary Stomper, and that way if you draw it late, it gets back the Atraxa or the Atali or whatever. But if you get it early, it functions as Topiary Stomper, but it doesn't. If they kill it, then you don't get the ramp. So it only ramps you for certain things. How many times in ramp have you? Okay, I'm going to use all my ramp except for 1 mana, and that 1 mana is dedicated to Leyline Binding, right? And that's a little harder to do with a card like this that only decreases creature costs.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I just think there's so many. It's easily killable. I believe. Let me look at its stat line again.
It's a 3/2.
This is a 3-drop that dies to cut down. This is a 3-drop that dies to play with fire. And you can say, oh, it got me some advantage when it came into play, put a creature back in my hand. But if you play it on curb, it's not going to do that every time. So
I'm with you on this one. Like, I mean, is it a better Gravedigger? I mean, yeah, but I mean, that's a low bar. I mean, that's like, you could step over that bar. You might
Yeah.
trip over it. It's so low. You know what I mean?
And that's
Like,
a card that's like fine and limited. You know what I mean? Like, it's not, how good is it to be a better that card?
like, okay,
So,
it's legendary, so you can't have more than one. So you're never going to have your creature spells cost more than one less, which is fine. I mean, a reduction's a reduction. It's a 3/2, so you can't really block anything. I mean, you trade with some stuff for the most part, anything relevant. And again, it's not a witness where you get to return any card from your graveyard, right? Like, this particularly only gets creatures, which there is some upside for that. Maybe you play a 1 of or 2 of in the actual like Outlaws theme deck, possibly,
maybe.
because it's an outlaw. But I don't know if I'm putting this into green, black, or any type of Jund or whatever. I don't know if this is the type of card those decks actually want. And this, again, unless you're maybe on the 58th, 59th card, and you're like, you know what? I get some recursion, I can get a body back. Like, it's not bad.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's like in Golgari, I could see it just because, like, okay, late in the game, I get my Sheldred back. Early in the game, I can ramp into Aclazotz on curve. Or I can play this on 3, and if it's alive on 4, then I get to play Sheldred for 3 and still have like Cut Down or Duress up or something like that. Like, there are lines with the card in Golgari, but
here's the problem. Even at 3, do you want this more than Glissa, the Sunslayer?
Liliana.
You know? Yeah. Do you want this more than the Graveyard Trespasser?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Or
Preacher of the Schism.
Exactly. That's my next one. Do you want it more than Preacher of the Schism? Right. All those cards.
Preacher doesn't die to cut down. You know.
Yeah, they're all going to be consistently better than this.
Yeah.
And none of those die to play with fire, which this does. Right.
Yep.
2 or at least 2 of those in some way protect themselves or don't die to even like Lightning Helix or Lightning Strike. Right. So even that makes a difference. So like, I don't know. Like, I like the design. I think it's a cool card. I think the artwork's neat. I like what it does, but we're in the biggest standard we're ever going to have.
Right.
And 3 drops, there's a lot of options in black green.
Say, do you understand how good, I know you do, but just like a person watching this, do you understand how good you have to be a playable 3-drop in standard nowadays, you know? And I'm just not sure he's quite there. He might be one of the better top decks in Golgari, and that's why they end up playing him, but I wouldn't be surprised if they just don't, you know?
Yeah.
So, but all right, it's you. What is your number 3?
Okay, this is an interesting one for me because I just saw this starting to get a little bit of conversation here in the last couple of days. And it's Ancient Cornucopia. It's a 2 colorless and a green, an artifact. It taps for a mana of any color. And then when you cast a spell that's 1 or more colors, so basically any card.
Almost any spell.
I guess anything that's not an artifact, I guess. Yeah.
Or an Eldrazi or something.
You can gain 1 life for each color in that spell's cost. You can only do that, though, once each turn. So it's a bit of a weird card because I was really trying to think, like, what decks in Standard that play green would want this. Maybe that's a base green domain type deck, possibly.
Maybe.
You know, post rotation because you're going to lose some cards.
When you cast your Atraxa, you know?
Yeah, like,
okay.
Maybe I could be talked into that a little bit. Like, but that was like the only thing I came up with. Like, maybe there's something that cares about artifacts that's also green based, and then you would play this because, you know, it's just upside. But then you need to have colored artifacts and not regular artifacts, or you don't even get the life gain off of this. So I'm like, I don't know where this goes. I like it in commander decks. I have a couple of green-based commander decks that might be able to play something like this.
Yeah, I've got a Dina deck in commander that probably really wants this card.
Yeah. And some incidental life gain's always awesome. And it's a mana rock, so in those cases it's cool. But I think that's kind of it. And I don't even know if it goes into all that many decks. Maybe the green-based commander decks, because it's just, again, another mana rock that gets you some life. So
even that, mana rocks in commander have to be. There's so many choices for 3 mana rocks in commander that you have to be so good. So you have to be getting some kind of trigger off the life gain or something like that.
Yeah.
Which is where I think this card potentially shines in standard. You know, if you've got like Abzan Amalia with Voice of the Blessed and you're trying to get like life gain triggers, I don't know, maybe.
Maybe, but then it's like your only green card. And
yeah, what other green cards do you play?
3 mana. I guess technically it's 2 mana because you pay 3, but then you can tap it for 1. So I mean, there's that.
Tap it to cast like Lunarch Veteran on the same turn.
Yeah, so it's a little weird. Like, don't get me wrong. Again, this is why it's on our overrated list. I don't think the card's trash. I think there are actual uses for it, but man, I feel like I went from hearing nothing to all of a sudden the hype was just like so high on this card, and I don't really understand.
There's some good paths in standard for it. I mean, like Lightning Helix gains you 5 life, but are you playing Naya Control? You know what I mean? Like Faithful Mending now gains you 4 life. Okay, like, we can talk a little bit about some of the lines with this card, but altogether, like, okay, you're playing Bant Control. What other green cards in your deck? Colossal Sky Turtle, Shigeki. I don't know. You can put something together.
Yeah, maybe
But
that's
like,
a world, right? If that's
know.
a deck, then sure. You can talk me into it. If Bant Control becomes a real thing, this will be a key part of that deck.
But like even then, Celestis is a card that exists, and like it's probably better than this card. Like Celestis draws you cards, fuels reanimation. Any deck can play it. It doesn't have green in the cost.
Yep.
Like maybe Celestis rotates, and like there's some sort of argument for this.
But, yeah, that's one. Like I can revisit this card in September, and we'll be like, "Oh, well, now you obviously play this card. Why would we ever tell people to play it?" But yeah, cool card. I think it'll go into several commander decks. I'll play a couple of them, but I think that's probably as far as it goes for me right now.
Yeah, but basically the same, honestly. Where are we? Oh yeah, this is one everybody loves. I keep hearing about how good this card is, so let me just rip the Band-Aid off and talk about Colossal Rattleworm.
Yeah,
as my number 3, I guess here. This is 4 mana, 2 and 2 green for a 6/5 worm, and it has flash as long as you control a desert, and also always has trample no matter what. You can pay 1 and a green and exile it from your yard to search your library for a desert, put it on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle up. So I'm going to go ahead and say this is a good Magic card.
Yeah.
But it is also severely overrated. Because at the end of the day, and I'm going to catch some flack for this, because like, even if they do, like, okay, it dies to Doomblade, but even if they do Doomblade it, you get a ramp off of it. Like, these are good things. But at the end of the day, just a big guy. It's just a really big guy. And like, there's a ceiling on really big guys, you know? Like, oh, he's a 4 mana 6/5 or whatever. Okay. Well, Pugnacious Hammerskull's a 3 mana 6/6. Okay. You know, he's got flash if you have a desert. And I think it's going to matter. Like your opponent hits you with Sunfall or Depopulate and you can EOT cast Worm. Like, yeah, that's a good sequence, but end of the day, big guy. That's it.
You know, like it didn't make my overrated list just because it's probably priced about right now in like the $5-ish, $6-ish range. So I don't hate that. I think for me, it's just I like the card. I'm with you. I think it's a playable card. It's fine. But
I do too.
I kind of need to see how good deserts are.
Yeah.
Right? Because if we're just playing like the multicolored deserts to deal damage, and then this kind of goes into a Gruul or Golgari weird mid-rangey thing, then like I guess it's fine. But if we're playing decks that are playing like 8 deserts, maybe 10 deserts, or an all-out desert deck, then like this card becomes great, right? Yeah. Because now we're almost always going to have it at flash, and your opponent has to worry about that, and it becomes a real thing. And then the ramp also matters, right? Because then you get to search for a desert, and that's awesome.
No, the last thing I'll say is just that, like, I think people are taking the desert thing for granted, and this card does have a very real deck building restriction baked into it that I think people are like, you'll have a desert. And it's like, yeah, you'll have a desert, but it will have come into play tapped and affected your curve on other turns. And you just never know, you know?
Dude, how many times have we played like 4 Restless Cottages and you're like 10 turns deep and hadn't seen one?
I swear, dude.
Right? There's no guarantee if you're only playing 4 deserts that you're going to have one.
That's true. That's 100% true. It's so true. How many times have I been on stream like, can we draw like my kingdom for a creature?
Exactly.
You just never know. But with that in mind, what is your number 2?
Oh, this is probably the card I want to be wrong about the second most. But Generous Plunderer. It's a colorless and a red for a 2/2 human rogue with menace. So far, so good. Yeah. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may create a treasure token. If you do, target opponent also gets a treasure token that's tapped. And then whenever it attacks, if it deals damage to defending player, equal to the number of artifacts they control.
Yeah.
There's a couple of things in play with this card. The first is that it's almost symmetrical. You get to activate first with the extra treasure than your opponent because theirs is tapped.
Right.
But you are still giving them treasure. So it's something to worry about. But the treasure could technically be extra damage, right?
It hurts them, right?
Yeah.
Like if they try to bank treasures, then like it's gonna hurt.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, where I think this card could shine would be in a world where, maybe the new Magda's a thing and you're playing something that cares about a bunch of treasure, right? Alongside whatever, like Gold Vein Hydra and other stuff, right?
That's good call.
Maybe that's a real thing. Or in a world where people are already playing a lot of artifacts, right? With these things are making 3/3 golems or whatever else. Because then every time this connects, it's like, okay, well, here's 4 damage, 5 damage. Now, it's only a 2/2, so connecting can be very difficult.
Yeah.
But if you do, it could have a high upside. The problem is, how often are we going to realize that upside, right? It's a 2/2. Right. Even though it has menace, that's nice. So in the early part of the game, maybe you connect a couple times for a couple extra points. Are we doing something with those treasure? How much of a liability is it for your opponent to get ramped up to 4 mana or 5 mana on their next turn to do whatever big thing, right?
Yeah.
But it's a little bit scary. I don't know how to properly evaluate this because it's doing some very strange things that we haven't really done before. And it's not a cheap card. I think I've only seen these. The lowest was like $10 or $12 in a couple places right now.
Really? Wow.
I think so.
Man.
I don't know. I'm sure it's going to come down, but
I don't know. That's a tough call because like the card is either incredible or not very good.
Yeah, that's kind of it, right? I think that's why it's on my overrated list is because like the ceiling's fairly high, right? If the format, the metagame goes the right way, this could be a real player.
This could be specifically good in older formats.
Yeah, and that's the other option, right? If you're playing Legacy or Vintage where there's a couple of decks that are artifact based, well, every time you connect, this is going to be like 5 damage every time or whatever, right?
It's a real threat,
So that's pretty cool. But, I'm looking around right now. Yeah, it's like $10, $11 on several sites right now.
It probably shouldn't be that much.
Yeah, I just don't know. Like, again, it's a rogue. So it does fit the Outlaws decks. So maybe that's a thing. Though there are a lot of like 2 and 3 mana Outlaws. So maybe you don't need to play it. But yeah, I don't know. I want to be wrong about it because I feel like whatever world where this is good, a lot of fun things are going down. Right? Like I'm into it.
I will say about Standard, I'm not going to push back too much. I don't love this card. It didn't make my top 50, which was actually like if it was a top 51, this might be on there. But like, I have some issues with it. But what I will say to push back is that we're in a Standard where like Simic Artifacts is a deck, Blue-White Artifacts is a deck, Golgari, well, not necessarily Golgari, but Boros is a deck. They have a lot of artifacts in between maps and clues and stuff like that. Even Control will have like Might tokens and Incubator tokens and stuff like that, random artifacts. There's a lot of good decks right now that just like have incidental artifacts in play, usually tokens. So like if this does connect, maybe you just slap them for 3, you just bolt them, So
yeah, and you don't have to give them treasure. You might just be like, whatever, I'm just going to attack and try to ding you for an extra 3 or 4 every turn.
That's the thing that gets me most about this card is that like giving them a treasure is so dangerous, but by the same token, there's a lot of 2 mana ramp guys that usually won't make it till your next turn when you play them on 2. This guy, I think, has a slightly higher chance of making it till your next turn, like actually untapping with him and ramping you because your opponent also wants the ramp.
Yeah, they might be like, let me let you have your upkeep first and see if you give me a treasure.
Yeah, you have to prove to them that wasn't a good idea.
Fair.
But it may not be a good idea for you to do that either. It really depends on the matchup. That's where I think this might be like a sideboardy kind of card.
Yeah.
But altogether, yeah, there's a lot of stuff I like about it, but I just don't think it's quite there. I think the symmetry on it is too hurtful. Even though it gives your opponent the tapped one, I still think the symmetry is too much, yeah. Not a huge fan, but maybe. I will, same as you, I'll say maybe on this one. But overrated.
All right, so what do you got in the number 2 slot?
The number 2 slot... Our lists are just nothing but cards people love every time.
That's why they're overrated. Otherwise,
that's exactly. They wouldn't be here otherwise. It's a Smuggler's Surprise. This is a green mana for an instant with Spree. You can pay 2 mana to mill 4 cards. You can put up to 2 of the creature cards and/or land cards that you milled into your hand. You can pay an extra 5 mana. This is the mode everyone's talking about. You may put up to 2 creature cards from your hand onto the battlefield. And for an extra 1 mana, creatures you control that are big, they have power 4 or greater, gain hexproof and indestructible till end of turn. So kind of a heroic intervention for your big guys. sort of a card advantage piece on the one end. But again, what everyone is going on about with this thing is the fact that you can just drop 2 guys for 6 mana. So the idea is this better than ramping into an Atraxa when for 1 mana less, you could play the Atraxa and something else out of your hand. My major issue with this, and I think the thing that's going to keep it from being a thing, is that if you do ramp to 7 mana and play Atraxa or a Tally, then they are uncounterable due to Cavern of Souls. That will never happen with this card. This card is basically always counterable. And what are you going to wait till you have 9 mana open to get through No More Lies? I just don't think it's there. And one more thing, I'm going to turn it over to you. I'm sure you've got a lot to say about this card because there's a lot to say about it. Everyone does. But like, there's also kind of no guarantee you're going to have 2 giant guys to drop with this by the time, like you ramped all the way to 6. It's turn 4. Do you have the Atraxa in the Ateli? No. Okay. Like, so I don't know. I just think there's a lot of there's more hurdles than it looks like. The best thing about the card is the instant speed, because you can do it at the end of your opponent's turn, and that's discussed. You can do it during your opponent's combat step. Like, that's gross. And I'll acknowledge that these things are good, but I think this card might actually kind of rot in your hand more than you thought it would.
I think for me, because I've been debating this with some of the green decks I've already been playing, it's like how much I like Tamiyo Safekeeping versus Tyvar Stand versus the +1 that puts +1/+1 and gives you hexproof, trample, whatever.
Snakeskin.
Yeah, they're all useful in different ways. But the fact that usually you're trying to save your 4 or 5 power creatures anyway, because those are the ones that matter. You're not that worried about saving the mana creature or whatever, right? So for 2 mana, being able to save everything seems kind of cool, right? Your multiple relevant things at one time, like. But I'm with you. I don't know if the 6 mana option is the thing I'm excited about. And I think that's why I kind of agree with you that it's on the overhyped list. Like, I think I'll still play with the card. Because,
there's going to be some stuff. We're going to try some nonsense with the card.
Just being instant speed, that alone makes it almost worth it. Because, like, I don't know, during your end step, I'll pay 5 and get a Tyrannix Rex or a Titan of Industry or whatever the case may be. Even if it's just 1 creature, instant speed for 5 mana, like, I'm okay with that.
You could argue that against control, they go to end their turn. I try to resolve this. They counter it. Okay, I've still got the creatures in my hand. Right? Like, I didn't resolve the spell, so I didn't get the creatures on the table. That means that I get to go untap my lands and play the monster, right? Like, like if I had 6 mana to cast this card, then it's possible that I could get this card countered, untap my lands, play a land, and then just play the Atraxa. Now that I've tapped some of my opponent's mana, I got an A counter out of their hand. So like, there are arguments for the card, even against control. But ultimately, I do think the Heroic Intervention mode is maybe the best mode, because if your opponent hits anything other than Sunfall, we are in a Sunfall standard, so the Heroic Intervention mode's not as good. But if they hit to populate, deadly cover up, something like that, and you save your 1 5 power guy, you probably win the game.
Yeah, and that's kind of the thing, right? I'm looking at this also as a counter to the White Spree that does the 6 mana instant speed Reaper, right?
Yeah,
because they're like, okay, I'm going to attack. And they're like, okay, I'm going to get rid of your board. And you're like, not these 2 big guys, though.
Not these guys.
Yeah, like that I can get behind. But I'm with you. I think mode 1 and mode 3, they let me go, mill cards, take stuff from my graveyard, put it in my hand, whatever, right? Like, that makes a lot of sense, right? And I'm okay with, hey, let's protect our guys. And maybe even do both of those, because that's only 5 mana, right? Reasonable. Actually, I guess it's just 4 mana, right? 2, 1, and 1. Yeah, so it's not bad. Sure. Like, I'm down for that. Uh-huh. I don't know how often, though, we're going to see the upside on the +5. Or at least not for 2 big guys, right? You might do it for 1. Now, occasionally, if you just get it and you get 2 monsters, that's going to be brilliant. That's probably amazing. Ball game.
I still think you're making a good point. Like, I think if you just get an Atraxa off this at instant speed, like, that's probably good enough. Like,
I'm thinking, like, even in mono green, say against like the Boros deck or whatever, like, they attack and you're like, okay, here's some big, I don't know, like I said, Titan that makes 2 blockers and gains some life, and then I'm just going to attack next turn, right? That's fine.
What do they do about that?
Yeah, nothing. Literally, like, they just die. Right?
Yeah, I mean that is a good point. Like
So
if you
like
can
that
ramp
I'm
up to
okay
this,
with, but I think I'm with you. So many people are like, oh, but if you have 6 or 7 mana, you can do this, you can get these guys. And I was like, but how often is that going to happen?
right? How often is going to line up? I
Yeah,
do think
and
the
because I'm
card is
with you. You got to ramp, you're playing stuff for the board, you got to have the creatures already in hand. Like, and is it better for you to just sit on this versus just play the creature?
I definitely think there's a lot of good stuff about the card. It's just like we've talked about with a couple of cards already today. It's not that they're not good. It's just that like people are going a little too Christmas land with some of the, stuff you
Yeah, and
want to
ultimately, like I said, in these lists, where does it fit? Right? Because
exactly. Where
there's
does it go?
some decks where you're trying to protect all your creatures of different size, and you want to play the +1/+1 counters. You want something that pumps your tramplers, so you want a Tyvar stand, right? Like you're gonna be replacing those cards to play one of these cards. But yeah, like I
But
said, I think it's a neat card. I just don't know if like it fits the hype of the Magic Christmas land everybody's putting on it.
agreed. But with that said, I know that you and I have the same number one.
We do.
And I honestly think you could call this. You could. A lot of people watching probably call this number one, but
Yep.
go ahead and let the people know.
Yep,
what it is.
put it down in the comments right now. I'll give you a couple of seconds.
Yep.
If you want to know, I'll see if people get it right. But I think this is an easy one to call.
Yeah.
Jce Reawakened.
Boom. Yep.
I mean, okay, it's the first 2 mana planeswalker we've had since Tybalt or whatever,
Tybalt,
right?
Yeah. He was famously god awful.
Tybalt was real bad, dog. Like he was real bad. Like
Awful.
I think I only even ever saw one that I would even call reasonable deck. I'm never going to say it's good or even playable, just reasonable. Like it's just not any good. The card's just not any good, right? And this has the drawback of you can't play it on the first couple of turns of the game. So if till turn 4, you can't even play it.
Jce Avenger text.
Which I guess is fine. It makes sense. Draw a card, discard a card, right? It has 3 loyalty, +1, draw a card, discard. That's fine. That's typical J stuff.
Yep.
Now, the other +1 to be able to exile a non-land card 3 or less from your hand and give it plot. Okay. I'm sure there's something awesome we could do there. Yep. Probably in an older format. I can't imagine there's anything crazy and standard I want to do with it. But I can see there's a bunch of crazy artifacts, enchantments, especially the further back you go. So like maybe there's a world for that, getting a free thing.
Even if you just plot removal, that's probably fine. You know what I mean?
Well, sort of, but you have to play the plot card as a sorcery.
I know. That's the thing. Is it has to be a sorcery and it has to be on a later turn.
Yeah, so that's the other problem there, right? And then the -6 is until end of turn, whenever you cast a spell, you copy it, you choose new copies. Like, well, that's awesome. However, it also needs to sit, be activated 2 more turns beyond this one. And then on that 3rd turn, you have a emblem that lets you do it. Oh no, it's not even it. It's just till end of turn. It's not even an emblem.
Exactly.
Like so, you have to do it on the combo
point
turn.
That out. It is you only get 1 turn to combo off with this. Like the ultimate, actually, this is one of the least you win the game ultimates in a really long time. But if you cast, Breach the Multiverse off of this and double it, like you win the game. You do.
Sure.
So if you cast double Squirming Emergence off of it, you win the game. So like, there's plenty of ways to do stuff with it, but. Yeah, the ultimate's not as powerful as 10 other ultimates that are in standard and easier to get to. Because, this goes to 4 the first turn it's in play, and it has to go all the way to 6, 4, 5, 6, and then that's 4 turns.
And it's also like it not getting targeted or attacked or anything else in between. Like, here's the thing, though. I guess there's a world where, Dimir control-ish stuff could play this. Like, you're sweeping or dealing with creatures for a couple turns. Like,
I think the card definitely sees play.
Yeah, like you play Jce, 100%. You take your time drawing cards and discarding, and then. But the problem I'm looking at is do they even really need to copy a breach, right? Like you just cast breach at that point, you're probably ahead anyway, right?
Is that win more, right?
Yeah, that's sort of my issue. Like this is just style points. Like I don't. Because I'm trying to think what world do I need this card to guarantee a win? But if I'm in that situation. The big things I'm doing probably already win. So, yeah, I don't know.
Okay, I've got a Shieldred out, and they've got 2 guys. Suddenly, being able to just copy Go for the Throat is very good.
Sure.
So it doesn't even have to be a nuts thing, but honestly, I think the ultimate is possibly the least impactful part of the card, and that's where I think we both have the same problem with the card. Okay, so you get a 2 mana planeswalker on turn 4, which allows you to keep shields up for counter spell removal, whatever. That's obviously the point of the card. But the actual abilities on the planeswalker, I will say it does have 2+ abilities, which is good. But the actual abilities on the card aren't that special.
Yeah, I think that's my issue. Like, don't be wrong. There's a world where you say, all right, let me put one of my card draw spells off to the side so next turn I can just cast it for free or whatever. And like, that's
3
cool.
cards is amazing.
Yeah, you're getting some mana advantage that way over a couple of turns. So I'm not saying it's trash, but like, I don't know how many decks this goes in. I don't know if every blue-white control deck, even now, I'm thinking about Azorius Control, and outside of early removal and maybe like quick study,
deduce.
Yeah,
I mean, maybe you take quick study. Yeah, if you're playing, because usually people play either quick study or deduce.
But I'm kind of
it does seem like you'd have to take card draw out, and then if you do that, you have to find ways to use your graveyard to make this card a little bit more relevant.
So it's like, I don't know, man. Like it'll get played, but I think it's like a 2 of in those types of decks where you're talking about Dimir or Azorius Control, and it'll be quality. I don't think it's going to be trash or anything. But yeah, I think everybody went, oh, a 2-mana Planeswalker and a new Jce, and it's like,
It's like, I think in blue-white control, if you play this on 4 and you have no more lies up, you're doing okay. Like, I do think like the purpose of the card is going to make sure it sees play. You know, you've got shields up in your control deck and you have a Planeswalker. And I think it's good in like random builds, like obviously Reanimator, because you discard the cards on a plus. It's good in Reenact the Crime in Dimir because you discard a card, you know. So there are builds the card is specifically meant for, but like even in just Dimir control, blue-white control, I do think the card sees play. It's just that like, how good is ticking up to draw a discard? How good is ticking up to plot a card? Is plotting the card even really that good?
Think about this though. For 4 mana, Wandering Emperor was instantly so much better.
That's another.
You know what I mean?
And you can't play it till turn 4, but in blue-white control, you're not playing this on turn 4. You're holding up Emperor.
Yeah, you're probably playing Emperor at that point.
Or you're playing Depopulate. You know, like I think late in the game on like 6 or 7, you get Jce, but then
that's exactly where you want it. Yeah.
But at that point, like, is it good? You know, like
I think just to keep your hand stocked, you keep just drawing every
keep
turn.
The good cards in your hand. That's true.
That's probably what it's for.
You know, especially matchup dependent. You know, if I'm on control.
Yeah.
If it's a mirror match, I want certain cards. If I'm
you definitely want
I need to buy another sweeper. You know, so yeah, against in the control mirror, I think this card is bonkers. The plot mode might not be as good as I want it to be in control mirrors, but just being able to tick up for card advantage and copy your spells is
for sure
disgusting. It's very, very good. It's also worth noting too that like a lot of the time in control, you'll play this on 4 or 5 and have the mana up, but you might have to tap the mana immediately to counter a counter spell or to counter a removal spell against Jce. So yeah, you get to keep mana up, but I bet there's going to be a lot of times a control mage goes, okay, it's turn 4, play my 4th land. Here's a Jce. I've got shields up, but their opponent forces them to tap mana down on their own turn.
Oh, I wouldn't even be surprised if people don't even try to cast this in the mirror till like turn 6 or 7.
Yeah, you got to have a lot of mana open. You got to have double shields up to actually cast this card. So, I mean, you're done. Like if you are control versus control, you cast this on 4, they try to counter it and no more lies, they're no more lies or something. Yeah, sure, you got a Jce on the table. You're completely shields down going into their turn. That is a bad call, almost no matter what. So
and it still might die to just get lost or whatever.
Yeah, they could just get lost when they untap, you know, like, yeah. So you're 100% right. I think the safe spot to play this is 6 or 7, but in that, unless you have complete control of the game at that point, you know, I'm not sure the card is that good, but you know, just ticking up to draw you're right. That's probably good.
You know what? I figured something out. This is why our viewers like each of our channels, because we both hated this and put it at our overrated number 1, right? It's all the same people. That's all.
Yeah, exactly. But it was funny is we both hated it and put it at number 1, but we're both talking about like ways it's good.
Yeah, but that's the thing. You have to be at least playable truly to be overrated, I think.
In some ways.
Yeah.
Right. It's not that you're unplayable, it's just people talk about you too much or expect too much from you.
Exactly.
And I think that's the case with this card. Good, solid Magic card that will almost certainly see at the very least standard play, but it's not going to do all the things I think people really expect it to do right now. It's not the best Planeswalker in standard, and I have literally heard people call it that.
It could be great for older formats, though. A lot of the good spells are super cheap. And at that point, getting to use that plot ability would be pretty awesome.
Yeah, the one good thing I'll say about this, especially in older formats, is that anything that like Helping Hand, I know Helping Hand is creatures only, or Unearth, which is creatures only. But if we ever get, return target non-land permanent to play for 2 or 3 mana, return target non-land permanent with mana value 3 or less, or something like that to play, then suddenly this has a chance of coming into play before turn 4. And that's where things get interesting.
That's
But to the
fair.
best of my knowledge, we don't have a whole lot of tricks like that at the moment. So, but maybe you Squirming Emergence at
Yeah, I don't think we're going that deep.
Yeah, I really don't think we are. But like there might be interesting kind of reanimation strategies with a card like this, where you get this out and then it fuels your reanimator strategies for the rest of the game if you can get it out early. Or maybe it plots very important cards. You can play a 3-drop for free on 3 because you were able to cast this on 2 somehow. You're able to get it on the table. It's like there are things, but ultimately I'm just not like too convinced. I think they balanced it well. The card is designed well, which means it's balanced. But you got anything else to say about old Jce over here, Jason?
No, I think we've talked him to death.
It's like everybody else on the internet at this point. But yeah, he's not worth freaking out over, and neither are all the other 9 cards or whatever that we talked about today, at least to my mind and to yours. So I guess you got anything you want to take out, take the people out on here?
You know what?
To finish things up?
If they want content every day, especially standard content, but card reviews, other fun stuff, you can come check us out. I have some dumb shorts that are up. You can enjoy those as well.
Nice.
Over at PowrDragn, PowrDragn, and literally come hang out because there's content every day. There has been for 4+ years straight now. So not planning on stopping.
Single day. There are a lot of Magic players out there on the internet, content creators that get a lot of credit for playing every single day, and you don't get enough. You've got a new video with a new deck every day, and I'm tired watching you work.
I'm doing my best, man.
I'll leave a link in the description to PowrDragn's channel. He's been on the channel a bunch of times now. If you're not watching him by now, I don't know what's wrong with you. Go check out PowrDragn, link in the description. Along with other links, there's stuff. We're going to put the link to the top 10 sleepers list down there in the comments. There's going to be a link to the Patreon if you're interested. Just $1 a month is all I really ask, and it supports the channel more than you could possibly understand. If everybody gave $1 a month, we could do unbelievable stuff. I could fly Daquan to my house to do this.
Oh, no joke.
But either way, if all you can do is watch the videos, I appreciate that too. That watch time matters, baby. So just thanks for being here is all I'm saying. But for PowrDragn, I am Dev from the place. And as usual, thanks for watching, Wizards. That's Allski Kowalski for now. Everybody have a good time. We love you. In any case, the last thing you got to make sure you do, of course, is spread love and be kind.